Welcome to the big SEC regular season, SEC tournament, NCAA seeding, MVP episode. We'll talk about the game too. It's going to be a big time episode. At the end, we also have. We'll just go over the list here. We've got MVP discussion. We've been doing our MVP after every game. I finally did the math on how many MVPs we have, and we're going to give you the results on who's the overall MVP for this team for the regular season. Then we're going to talk about NCAA seeding. That's like the hot thing everybody's talking about. What seed do we get? Who are we playing? What's our path look like? What does everybody else's path look like? Then we'll get into the SEC tournament from a higher level. Who won? What the games look like? The crazy zany stuff. What we ended up with. Then we'll get into the game. I know we do postseason stuff usually, like post-game kind of things, but we figured we'd start with the hotter stuff and get to the game because that'll kind of might drag us down a little bit compared to some of the other stuff. Then we'll get into some of the coaching news, a lot of coaching news in the SEC. It's just interesting to see the implication. And we'll finish it up and stick around. And if you're interested in this too, we're going to put it on at the end. Horace Spencer's come on the show, the legend. So he's come on the show, and we did a great interview with him earlier today around noon. So he didn't know the seeding and the SEC tournament results and stuff at that point. So, just have that in mind, and we'll put the little timestamp on there about when to check that out. So welcome, Matt. Thoughts?
It's an extravaganza. I think this or the Thursday, the first full day of the tournament, is the best day of the sports calendar for me personally. Really excited. Got to get pumped when I saw Auburn come up on the bracket. I still take that for granted, or I don't take that for granted after the 15-year drought and then COVID, and then last year, obviously not getting to be in. So really excited. And, Friday was rough, and we'll get into why it was rough. But I think everything that happened today is about as good as we could have asked for.
Well, let's not, I know people are waiting with bated breath to find out who the MVP. I'm sure every player it's like Selection Sunday, basically. I'm sure, or the high, or like some other trophy people get for different sports. The MVP. And let's go from bottom to top, like the least amount of MVPs to the number one. So tied for they got MVPs, and some players didn't get MVPs. So tied for last. Oh, I made a spelling error in here. So actually, there's some change even in my own head. I had to do a little pivot over here. So tied for having won, Zep Jasper and Devin Cambridge. Surprised, I forgot Devin Cambridge had gotten one way back in at a conference play, I believe. So both of them are fan favorites, and we like on the podcast to talk about them, like their little niche in the sport. So I think both of them kind of had those games where they finally did something we thought they could, and we had to reward them with an MVP. And Zeps, I think Cambridge was a dual MVP. As much as we tried to avoid it, we ended up doing several. And Zeps was actually a solo. So if you're putting them in order, I might put Zep above for having the solo. Next up on the list, 4 MVPs, KD. He started out super strong and had several MVPs at the start of the season. And he had the Missouri MVP. He had an OT, an overtime MVP. I didn't count that one. I think he deserved it from a recognition standpoint for my tallies at the end of the year. I didn't want to count it. Next up on the list, it'll be the third position guy, Wendell Green with 7. He's he had a great streak there. I was going down the list, and when I was putting these names together, I kind of do it like one by one. It's like, dang, Wendell might win this thing. He's got a lot. But man, down the stretch, as we all know, it's kind of fallen off a little bit. So he had 7. So don't forget when we're upset later about some stuff, or we're talking about, man, he had 7 MVPs this season. That's third on the team. He's the third most important player on the team, I guess you could say. Next, second place, here's the big 2 dogs. We kind of knew it was coming down to the big 2 dogs. Wendell and KD kind of gave him a little fight, but we knew before the season, we knew in the season, these 2 guys were going to be the guys. Drum roll for second place, so you'll know. Actually, I'm just going to announce first place because you'll know who first place is at the end of it. First place for the Jungle MVP for 2021, 2022, Walker Kessler with 10 MVPs. Jabari comes in with 8 MVPs. It was a close one. If things had gone different in the SEC tournament, Jabari's still got a chance. I hope we go late. Jabari's on right now. A lot of his MVPs have come on late. So Jabari, listen up. You're 2 away from tying Walker. We go Elite Eight, and Jabari could be ahead. So I know, there's things to play for in the NCAA, but we all know the real thing to play for is the Jungle MVP.
Absolutely. No, thanks for totaling those up. I think that gives you a good idea for the season. Walker, if you look at advanced metrics, I forget which one it is. Walker had 10 or 12 straight games where he was our best player, taking into account both ends of the floor. Statistically, not from a bias, just looking at the game like we do. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, obviously Jabari is the best NBA prospect. He's been our best player, I think, as a scorer and as a true freshman. Obviously what he's done has been amazing, but where would this team be without the emergence of Kessler on both ends, that we just didn't see coming at all? I think that may be why he, let's be honest, we just had way higher expectations for Jabari than Walker, and Walker really did a great job of soaring our expectations through the roof.
Yeah, Walker Kessler 2 triple doubles, Jabari Smith 0 triple doubles. So it's that. Don't forget, as much as Jabari is the great scorer and clearly the more talented player from an NBA prospect standpoint, a scoring standpoint, like Walker does a lot of things from all different angles. That's why he ultimately ended up with winning the MVP award for the regular season. We'll keep track with it. I'm hoping we can have a situation where we have to keep doing the math. We hope we're there. Some interesting thing. I look at this list. I was about to make this point. Dang, Cambridge ruined my point I was about to make. That we have MVPs from the point guard, we have MVPs from the 2 position, the 4 position, the 5 position. Cambridge ruined it by having the 1 MVP in the 3 position. But ultimately, like if you told me this list that we were going to do MVP for every game, and I was going to look at this at the end, I'd go, oh no, Alan Flanagan must have gotten hurt again. He must have decided not to play this season. He must have retore his Achilles or something. Like no Alan Flanagan on this list, preseason first team all SEC. Not on the list. So that, that kind of shows that gaping hole in our game that we kind of expected. And that, people brought it up a little bit that man, a lot of people expected a big thing when he came back and we've been in this lull and we kind of expected maybe this was the time for that to step up. And it's kind of been the opposite. So that's the MVP stuff. Matt, any other thoughts on the MVP race?
That's a good recap. We needed to give the people what they needed going into the postseason.
Yeah. All right. Well, we could talk about a little NCAA seeding here. We, it was interesting coming into the SEC tournament. The theory was that Gonzaga was locked in. Arizona was pretty much locked in unless they lost, in the first round of their kind of thing. Then it was who's my third one that's kind of locked in? Kansas, I guess. It was Kansas and Baylor, Kentucky and Auburn were kind of the 4 that were battling for those other 2. There's a lot of people out there that picked Kansas and Baylor to both have the other 1 seed, surprisingly, but a lot of people were saying whoever wins of Auburn and Kentucky, if they win the SEC tournament and go through Arkansas or Tennessee or vice beating each other, they're going to get that 1 seed. It ended up both Kentucky and Auburn went down in the SEC tournament. So that seed got taken away kind of. Oh, Duke's the other one I'm thinking of. They had a chance at a 1 seed. They went down early in their tournament. Baylor went down early in their tournament. I think Kansas ended up winning there. So then we had 3 locked in. We had Gonzaga, Arizona, and Kansas all won their tournaments and we're already kind of in that discussion. So then we have that fight for that last spot between Baylor that lost early, a Kentucky that lost early, and Auburn that lost early, Duke that lost early. Duke was pretty much knocked out. Then there was a lot of talk about Tennessee all of a sudden because they got hot late. And I'm glad ultimately the committee kind of looked at a bigger picture than ESPN. Man, ESPN was just pushing that narrative as hard as they could that Tennessee deserved a number 1 spot or whatever. They ultimately got 3 and they were shocked. I think maybe they could have done. I think Tennessee would be fine as a 2. I wouldn't have complained as them as a 2, but I think the committee looked at a bigger picture and they ultimately ended up picking Baylor, who I feel like Baylor has more losses than us, right? They have 6 losses to our 5. That's irritating to me. I feel like some of that's the reputation of the Big 12 right now. And I would have to look at Baylor's schedule altogether. Matt would argue it's metrics, which screw metrics. I'm tired of metrics. Metrics have had us bad all year long. So it's interesting. Baylor ended up with the other seed. So then 2 seeds ended up being Auburn ended up being a 2 seed, Kentucky ended up being a 2 seed. Who else ended up being 2 seeds?
Kentucky, Villanova, Auburn, Duke.
Duke.
Yeah.
What was do you know what our overall 2 seed was? Was it the highest one or the second highest one? Or,
so
you didn't beat us out for the highest 2 seed. Did they be pissed about that too?
So we should, if they did it according to proper principles, we would be the second 2 seed.
Behind 2, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, it doesn't really matter, but it's disrespectful after we beat them. I know it was at home, but.
Well, here's the thing. So if you had wanted to be the second 2 seed, or the top 2 seed, sorry, you would have been with Purdue, like you didn't want.
Oh, I didn't want that. Yeah.
With Baylor, North Carolina, UCLA, that Murray State in the second round potentially.
I love it. We can talk about our matchup now, or at least say the name now. We are playing as a number 2 seed in Greenville at noon Eastern against Jacksonville State, of the Jacksonville State that's from the state of Alabama. You can't tell me these bracket people didn't do this on purpose. Put us with the 15 seed that's from Alabama. They put Kentucky on the other side with Murray State, who I feel like it's another reason they did that. Like, you know, I'm sure like they're not like trying to find these, but when it gets close and they have like a 15 seed they can pick from against us, they're like, oh, that's a good matchup. Like they want the TV ratings to be good. They want the storyline. That's going to be a storyline. So,
well, and you're right. And the interesting thing with Jacksonville State, as a lot of people know, is they didn't win their conference tournament. The newbie in their conference won, and there's some dumb NCAA rule where they're not eligible. They had a worse regular season than Jacksonville State did. And then Jacksonville State gets to go, even though they didn't win their conference tournament.
What's
however,
the concept? What is the concept behind that?
Don't ask me to defend NCAA.
I know. There's got to be a concept. I just like can't even like think in my mind like why. Like if they can jump up and do it, like good for them.
I don't know, but I love the draw, and here's why. We've talked a little bit on the podcast about the location. You know, Auburn as a fan base is kind of new to this, right? So this is the first time. I would have to go back and look at 99 where we ended up, but I mean, there was only one location in this entire first and second round that was anywhere close to Auburn, and it was Greenville.
It is still not even really that close. Like no Atlanta, no Florida, no Nashville, nothing in Alabama.
No.
I think it's in Florida already. No Mississippi, none of that deep South region. Right. The closest is freaking Greenville and like Dallas. So it just sucks. Like how can you not have no New York City either? I'm in New York City. It's just weird that you can't have a tournament with this many sites and not have a Atlanta, not have a Nashville, not like do right vice versa, right? Do 1 year in Nashville, 1 year in Atlanta, 1 year in Orlando. Like it's weird.
It's weird. The only reason I can maybe see it is that the Final Four is down south. You know, maybe that plays into it a little bit. But the teams that lucked out were Duke. They're in Greenville as well, which I just looked at ticket prices. They're astronomical because Duke and Michigan State are both in Greenville as well.
So they have eight teams in Greenville.
Every site has 8 teams there. So
don't then put that one in a different location. Like, what is the point? I guess
they're not. What do you mean?
Make sure the sites make enough money, I guess. Like they have to have a certain amount of games, make enough money. Surely not. Surely it wouldn't be that bad.
That's just how it goes. That's how it's been forever. So that's great for us. That's a great first. And we play Jacksonville State, which is a good draw for us, I think. You know, USC and Miami are going to play opposite of us. We'll play the winner of that, hopefully, if Auburn can advance. Miami has been okay. You know, they're decent. The ACC was way down. I think USC might be a little undervalued as a 7 seed. That could be a little tricky, but I love that we avoided Purdue. I love that we avoided Texas Tech. I love that we avoided Tennessee. Wisconsin.
The concept wise, like I'm avoiding in my head is avoiding other big men because we've kind of seen it. Like Walker's amazing, but he's neutralized a bit with other big men, and like he dominates when it's a game where he's the kind of like freak athlete out there. But when he has to go against a big man, he gets in a little foul trouble. He doesn't like gets blocked out on like trying to get those blocks and stuff. So yeah, I think I heard USC's got some tall guys. So if we're like cheering somebody in that one, I think we want to play Miami. And Miami, I think, beat Duke at home in Durham. So I think that you know, they're not a bad team. They've upset some people. So
they're not bad. And look,
anybody play is going to be bad. So
yeah, anytime you get to the round of 32, I mean, you're playing somebody decent. I just think if you look at it, you know, Wisconsin's the 3 seed in our side that we could potentially play in a Sweet 16. I love that matchup for us. As you know, it's always going to be tough in the Sweet 16 unless upsets happen. You also have LSU and Iowa State that are going to pound on each other. And I don't think LSU is going to make it there. But if we did, I don't hate that matchup for us either. And then you look at the top.
Will Wadeless LSU.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind
playing a Will Wadeless LSU. I think that would be all right. I think we match up pretty good with them. So
yeah, I mean, I'd still rather avoid.
But by the time we'd have to play them, they would have gotten a little hot to win these couple games. So but Wisconsin's been a big team all year. I'm pretty sure they have a great player, like one of the greatest players in college basketball on their team right now, right?
Do they?
Was it Davies, right?
Oh, yeah, he's been there a long time. He's a good guard.
But I heard this year he's like a top 5 guy, right? Like he was in all the award watch lists this year. He's like been like blowing people up. I think that's the reason they're a 3 seed this year.
Maybe I'm sleeping on him a little bit.
I heard it's a good matchup though, that they don't have a guy that's going to be able to match up with Jabari. No one really can match up with Jabari, but like just from hearing some of the pundits today, they were like, who on this team could even like get in Jabari's face? So that could be good.
Well, and I just think about it in terms of we haven't done it consistently, but playing our type of game, our type of game is different. I think even if you watched some of the SEC tournament this week with us out, it's just we play differently. And I think when you get in these tournament situations, that can really be an advantage with our pressure on defense, our wanting to turn it up and have our depth and run. And I just, if you look at the other half, the only other point I was going to make, Kansas is playing really well. They're the 1 seed, but look at who they're going to have to go through. They're going to have to go through like Iowa's over there, who just won the Big Ten tournament. I think they're underseeded as a 5 seed. Providence is over there, was the best team in the Big East. They're a 4. They're all going to have to play each other and beat each other up. Whoever.
Even South Dakota State's dangerous. They haven't lost a game in like months. They went undefeated in their conference and have been really hot.
And Kansas,
that's awful for Providence, honestly. Providence had a really good year where they've had some really cool close wins and like had a whole thing. And now they have to go against like one of those teams that you just don't want to have to play.
Yeah. And then your reward for Providence. I laughed when I saw Providence come up. If you somehow, if you avoid the 4-13 upset there, you probably play Iowa, who just took it to the rest of the Big Ten and, has some really experienced guards up there. So I'm glad that the strength of this section tends to be at the top, that Auburn wouldn't have to touch until, the Elite 8 potentially. So.
And Iowa won the Big Ten tournament, right?
Yep.
Yeah, me and Matt were talking a little earlier today. That's interesting that Jacksonville, we got really lucky with Jacksonville State here. I'm sure there's the other 15 seeds are St. Peter's, the Peacocks playing Kentucky. So hopefully they'll lose to another Peacock team. Almost wore my Peacock shirt today. And then Cal State Fullerton, you got it on it. Yeah, he's got it. That's the Peacock from the student section, from the famous Tumors Corner video with Dylan Cardwell. So we got Cal State Fullerton over there too as a 15 seed, and Delaware. I'm sure those other 3 won their tournament. I'm sure those are not at larges or whatever.
Right.
So they're all coming off of a win streak of confidence. Now they're all like much less athletic teams, but so is Jacksonville State. So we got the 115 seed that didn't win their tournament is coming off of a loss because of that weird situation. So good for us. The one bad thing about it is that extra like in-state motivation kind of thing. All these players on that team, I'm sure didn't get picked by Auburn and would have loved to come play for Auburn or whatever. So that's a thing. I'm sure there'll be some pundits or different people from outside the state that are cheering against us that are like, oh, Jacksonville State fans must be going crazy, or I bet people are going nuts in Jacksonville State, blah, blah. Newsflash, there are 0 Jacksonville State fans. That is not a real thing. They don't exist. They're all Alabama fans or Auburn fans, and probably 90% Alabama fans that happen to go to Jacksonville State. There's no real Jacksonville State fan in the state of the world.
Well, you're right. So we play them first. I already said USC. The cool thing, the second weekend is going to be in Chicago. Again, the options were Philly, Chicago, San Antonio, or San Francisco. So if you're looking for, you would have loved Philly. For people in the Northeast, would have been great. Chicago is I will be tempted to maybe get there. You'd be looking at a Kansas, Iowa. That would be a lot of fans. But if Kansas and Iowa don't make it to the Sweet 16, that could end up being, and Wisconsin, I guess.
Big Ten, I love that area.
But so Greenville, Chicago, New Orleans is the destinations for us if we're going to keep winning.
No, I don't. I guess you play in a basketball arena, I'm sure, in the Sweet 16 in Chicago. So the tickets might be
United Center,
but at least we played the Final Four in Minneapolis, and I went, and that city's just not big enough for that kind of event with 4 different fan bases coming in. Like, it was so hard to find a place to stay. I ended up staying in a weird Airbnb, but with Chicago, the flights and the hotel rooms really shouldn't be too bad, I assume. So that's good. One less thing, but it does suck. I really want Philly so I could take a train down and not flew down already for that South Carolina game. But I'll be looking at how cheap the flights are in the hotel rooms and everything. And if we can pull it off, we'll do a live from Chicago at the Bean podcast or something.
Well, and I've already made it clear. I'll throw it out there here. I'm not trying to jinx the team, but I've said since Minneapolis, I was going to drive to the title game. Auburn makes that the end of that game so heartbreaking. I don't want to relive it, but I was like, I had already made plans. I was driving from Nashville to Minneapolis on Sunday, go to the national championship on Monday, and then it all gets taken away. So I hate that I didn't get to experience that like you did. So if we get to New Orleans, I'm there. I've already, it's drivable for me. I'm going to be there. So hopefully at one game before that. And like we know, it's so hard to make a Final Four. You know, we could spend this podcast talking about Duke and Kentucky, these amazing basketball schools that, you know, it's been a while. It's been a while since they've made a Final Four. It's hard to do, and there's a reason Tennessee's never done it. Auburn's done it one time 3 years ago. It's a challenge.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to do the math kind of in everybody's heads on what games to go to and different stuff. I'm sure Greenville, a lot of people will be able to make that drive and it won't be too bad to pull that off. Then you have to do this math of like, all right, well, we can wait and see if we make it to New Orleans, but the odds are so low to do that. Even if you make it to the Sweet 16, you're like, but I want to see this team play in the March. Do I like spend my money on that and then know that like if they go to New Orleans, I can have like the self-restraint to not also go there. I think it's easier for people that live down south. I'm sure 90% of the people that listen to this podcast live in the like within a couple of hours of Auburn. And I think it'll be a little easier choice for them. They can spend their money going to Chicago for like a trip. And then if we do make the Final Four in New Orleans, that's not too bad as a car trip, like carpooling with other people and stuff. So hopefully we'll make it hopefully at least one of us makes it. You know, I think we'll figure some out. Otherwise, we'll probably do some live podcasting from St. Pat's in New York, the New York City Auburn Club. I'm hoping, you know, that'll be fun to do as long as we're winning. How did you feel overall about I felt like we got a appropriate amount of respect. It would have been great to get that last one seed, but obviously we kind of left a bad taste in everybody's mouth on Friday and really the last month or so, like we've been talking about on the podcast, just not quite the same. I felt like the draw, the seed, the location, I think we got treated pretty fairly today. Yeah, after we lost Texas A&M, we kind of knew we got locked into it too. The only thing I could say about the disrespect from being a bit of a homer and just being like, why does a team that lost to Alabama that has more losses than us and also plays in the conference that Kansas won, which Kentucky beat them, and then we beat Kentucky. It just feels like the SEC is a bit like we know how deep the SEC is. You have a team like Alabama that went and beat Gonzaga, that beat Baylor, that beat Houston, and then has a losing record in the SEC. And like in a different sport, or if this was a different conference, they'd be like, see how deep the SEC is? You can do that and then have a losing record in the SEC because the SEC is that deep. We're just not getting that same respect. I mean, maybe one day it'll happen or whatever, but I think that's part of it.
There's two ridiculous things that we have to talk about in the league, at least. Alabama being a 6, it's absurd. I saw that their net, which for a long time their metrics were just so good, and that's what everybody's like, well, they have these wins and their metrics are great. Well, their net was 30. That's an 8 seed if you're just going by advanced metrics. How in the world do you get a 6 when you have 13 losses? You just can't convince me that Auburn at 19-13, a 9-9 in the SEC, and a first round exit in the SEC tournament would get a 6 seed. You just can't convince me of that. I don't think it's true.
Some of it, we talk about narratives and we talk about like it matters. The fact that the media picked them to be the first in the SEC and like they got to hype them up early on with a big win over Gonzaga and things like that. Like these media members, these committee members, everybody involved in this whole thing, they want to be right. We all want to be right. If we pick something one way or that, like there's this bias a little bit in your head that you have an expectation for where they should be, and when they don't meet it, that's an upset. Someone upset them. When if you had the other expectation, like, oh, they're not that great, and then they like do that, you're like, oh, they upset Gonzaga and Alabama's actually like it's weird they've been jumping up or whatever, like it comes down to expectations. So all year long, their losses have been excused, and all year long, like their wins have been lauded. And so, I mean, they are a wacky team. We can admit they're wacky. Most teams don't do what they've done. It's all went back and forth between that 6 to 8 seed was they got picked to win early on. And so then it was expected when they did, Yeah,
it's crazy. And the other thing, I mean, how about Texas A&M going on their run, looking so good, having a better or even record with Alabama, I guess, in the regular season. They go further in the tournament. Not only do they not get in, which I think at least in the South, everybody, SEC never, everybody's like, oh yeah, like I think they've done enough. I thought they did enough when they beat us, let alone beating Arkansas and then, having to play a 4th game in 4 days, which by the way, if you watch that game today, you should really look back and appreciate what that Final Four team did at Auburn, because they looked so fresh on that 4th day, running the brakes off of Tennessee in Bridgestone Arena. But A&M not only doesn't get in, they were the 4th team out. Like they weren't even the next team in.
I saw a good tweet by somebody today. Shout out whoever this is in the Auburn Twitter that said, "Did the SEC tournament even matter? Did anything that happened in these 3 days actually matter?" Because you
Right.
think about it, like sure, we were talking about. I mean, the picks from Lenardi or whoever were Kansas and Baylor to be those number 1 seeds. Everybody's expecting them to like meet in the finals or whatever, and then like there's that chance if Auburn or Kentucky went all the way, they would take one of those seats if whoever that loser was in the Big 12. But if you just stop the season at the end of the season, this seeding would probably have held up for the SEC teams at least. Tennessee ends up with a 3 seed, which is almost like they didn't even do anything in the SEC. They probably would have been a 3 or 4 seed without all those wins in the SEC tournament. We didn't move hardly because we lost early. Texas A&M didn't make it in. Kentucky would have ended up with a 2 at the end of the season probably. So it's like, what does it even matter?
Well, I do think we as fans and the media get way out of control on conference championship week. You know, you look at this 2 or 3 game sample size, not 30, 32 games. And I think people get, but Indiana was in a similar boat, and they barely snuck in, but they snuck in with a great run in the Big Ten tournament, proving they could play with all these great teams. It just, I don't know.
Did the SEC end up making? Because I kept hearing how many Big Ten teams made it. I just
And
really get irritated that they have this like respect for the SEC at the top, but like don't realize how deep the SEC is altogether. You know, the Big Ten last year and previous years too, it feels like they've lost a lot of games early, and then people are like, oh, and then they just do it again the next year. They just, I don't know.
Well, look at what A&M did. Look at Vanderbilt, you know, as the 11 seed in the SEC tournament. They had Kentucky all but almost beat, you know, with all the Big Blue Nation support and all the fans, you know, in Tampa cheering for them.
All the big out of conference games too were winners for the most part for the SEC. Like the Big 12 is supposed to be the best league right now, supposedly. At least that's what I've been hearing. And they lost. Baylor and Kansas lost to SEC teams. You know,
they lost the Big 12 SEC challenge overall. You know,
it feels like our crappy teams like Alabama are beating Gonzaga out there. So it's like actually Baylor lost. I don't know who. Actually, Baylor probably won against who? Tennessee at home for the SEC challenge, maybe, or who they play.
I forget.
No, they lost because they played Alabama. What am I thinking? They played Alabama and they lost. So Baylor, Kansas, and I guess who else is in there? Alabama, Gonzaga, they all lost. So I don't know whether the respect's not there. But this might be a good time to talk about I guess we can go down the list here where some of these other teams ended up. And we can go to the SEC tournament a little bit too. But you know, we got LSU's in our little field or whatever you would call it. If we go to the Sweet 16, if we both win out, we'll play each other in the Sweet 16. That's interesting. They got an 8 seed. Let's see. Kentucky got a 2 against St. Peter's. They're across from Baylor ultimately in that on that side. I think they might have another SEC team in here. Nope, no other SEC teams in there. That Murray State game, it's Murray State versus San Francisco on the other side of their little like round of 32. Auburn fans are going to be going pretty nuts, I think, for that Murray State Kentucky game, if that comes to be. Alabama's a 6 seed over here in Gonzaga's bracket. Arkansas is pretty close to them. I guess it'll take a while if they play each other. They're not like on the
Elite Eight.
Yeah. Arkansas is a 4 seed against Vermont. They'd play New Mexico or UConn in there. Memphis, they won their tournament. I know they're not an SEC team, but we've talked so much about Memphis. They actually made it as a 9 seed. And then who else we got over here? Anyone? Tennessee as a 3 seed against Longwood. I don't know what the deal is with Longwood, but they are a team, I guess. And so that's all the SEC teams. What was that, 6 teams?
Yep, just 6. A&M would have been 7 if they were out.
Alabama also has an interesting matchup. They're playing one of those play-in games, which I heard today, a funny joke on the selection show. Supposedly the NCAA doesn't like to call them play-in games. Supposedly all these teams that are on here have made the NCAA tournament. These are just the first 4 or whatever they call it or something. It's not play-in. You're in already, which is just bullcrap. Can you imagine making the tournament for the first time in a long time and then being in the play-in game? Just screw it. Just don't pick us, you know?
But it feels like every year a team played, and it's always one of the 12s or 11s. The 16s never win. But not say never. Shout out to Virginia for losing to a 16. But it always feels like one of those teams, whoever wins the first 4, takes that momentum. They play 2 days later. They've gotten out the tournament jitters. And they just go ball out. So Alabama's going to play either a Notre Dame team who finished like 2nd in the ACC, was way down this year, but they were near the top of the league, or Rutgers, who has beaten 6 of those really good Big Ten teams this year. They're not going to be scared of playing Alabama.
Rutgers is really hot right now, right? Haven't they beaten like all the I don't know. I saw recently, like they were making memes on college basketball, like the Grim Reaper of Rutgers, because they had beaten like 3 or 4 big teams in a row in the last like month.
They've hit some buzzer beaters. They've been close. The Big Ten is just a gauntlet like the SEC is. They have Ron Harper Jr., who's his dad was with the Lakers all those years. He's a really good player.
We lost a kid to Rutgers in recruiting recently too. They're building a little bit.
Yeah.
They're building a little bit over there. And Notre Dame beat Kentucky earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough. Alabama if you're looking for, solace in the fact that Alabama got a 6 seed, they're going to have to play the winner of that game. And by the way, Alabama has to go to San Diego for these first 2 games. They got to go cross country. And then if they somehow get to the Sweet 16, they'll have to play in San Francisco the next week against Duke, probably. So not an easy road.
They'll have to play Texas Tech in the second.
Texas Tech would be in San Diego. Yeah, if they get past that first round, then they probably will have to play Texas Tech. That's tough. Then Duke's tough, and then potentially Gonzaga. So really brutal road for Alabama, and I love it. And I hope they lose the first round.
And their whole MO, it seems, this year is to lose to bad teams and win against good teams. It's might be a good thing they get to play some like lower. Yeah, they might be, anyways, they might be playing the Vanderbilt type that they can lose to.
Look, everybody says that, but they got swept by us. They lost to Tennessee, or no, they beat Tennessee once. They've lost to some good teams too. I was glad to see that they have such a difficult path. And again, the geography of this matters. Like if you talk to Bruce, that Final Four year was not only impressive for who they beat, it was impressive how far we had to go every round, like geographically, coming off playing 4 games in 4 days in the SEC tournament. So like Arkansas,
it makes planning these little like trips back home a lot easier. You play your 2 games, and then sometimes I think some of these teams like Alabama going from San Diego to San Francisco, they might have to do the math of like, we're just not going back. You know how it is. You plan a trip like that, a 2-week trip is way different when you're like trying to plan out what clothes to bring, what stuff to do, and what food to eat, what medicine to bring. These kids are like kids. They're college kids. You don't want they forgot back home or what, like it just changes things a lot.
Let's hope that doesn't happen, because I don't want them anywhere near the Sweet 16. So.
All right. Well, that's kind of our NCAA stuff. I think we end up ultimately with a good path. We're going to have to fix some things in this week and get healthier and stuff for it to matter. But, if you're just taking a view of what's a good path, it's a good path, not bringing in what we've done so far in the season.
Well, and I would just say, as we kind of transition, you talk to anybody who's been around college basketball for a long time, they're going to tell you the best coaches find a way to get to lots of Sweet 16s. The best programs find their way to a lot of Sweet 16s. And then you just take your chances against the best in the country once you get to the Sweet 16. So Auburn has a really straightforward, difficult, potentially second round. But I mean, it's about as good, I think, with how we've played the last few weeks as we could have hoped for. So to me, that's kind of the target, is like, can you survive this weekend in Greenville, advance, figure some things out, and then take your shot against some really good teams after that, probably.
Yeah, after the bad loss to Texas A&M early in this SEC tournament, it's good that we got a good enough seed that feels like no matter what happens in this first game against a 15 seed Jackson State, like unless this thing is just completely broken, you can work out some kinks, hopefully. So we need that good little confidence. But this will bring us into the SEC tournament a little bit and into the kind of game talk. We'll get into that too. If you want to pull, I have the SEC tournament results pulled up. If you want to pull up the box score to that game against Texas A&M, it might be good to have. But the first round, Missouri beat Ole Miss, Vanderbilt beat Georgia, whatever, who cares, other than some of those coaches are fired now. The second round got interesting. A&M had a crazy comeback on Florida where they were down like 10 or something, or 13 or 15 or whatever.
You got that backwards. A&M was up 16 and Florida came back.
Okay, and it went to overtime. Crazy game. Exactly what we wanted. We didn't care who really won that game. Ultimately, we won Texas A&M, we thought, because we didn't want to play Castleton again, and Florida seemed to have our number a bit. And they went to overtime, which we really that's what we wanted, so that they could tire themselves out. Didn't seem to matter. But then LSU beat Missouri. That whatever. Mississippi State beat South Carolina. Who cares? But then the big upset was number 11 Vanderbilt over number 6 Alabama. That was great. You just, Nate Oates was trying to talk about how they were using our Final Four run as inspiration because they have a similar 3-point shoot. They could get hot. You never know. So they were saying go win the SEC tournament and you're back to where you won at the beginning of the year, whatever. And they lose in the first round, which is great. So then that sets up for our game at noon on Friday. It'll be 2 Fridays in a row that I'm not doing well at work. Put meetings on your schedule now, so no one puts any meetings on there. If you're a remote worker, like a lot of us, put some meetings on the calendar. But first game of the day, noon, we lose 67-62 to Texas A&M. Big upset. We'll keep going down the list before we start getting to the game, but Arkansas takes care of business against LSU, Tennessee over Mississippi State, Kentucky over Vanderbilt, even though that was a tough game for Kentucky. It's Vanderbilt, so good for them. So then it goes on to the next game, and we're like, oh, no, we got upsets. Texas A&M's going against Arkansas. These are the big matchups that should have been that top 4 that's a really solid top 4. Well, it made us feel a lot better that Texas A&M did the exact same thing they did to us against Arkansas. It was a really hot team, and people were picking them to maybe win the whole tournament. And they held Arkansas to a really low percentage from 3, like below 20, just like they did with us. And they shot above 50% from 3, just like they did against us. So they just had really figured something out in those games, that the really good 3-point defense and hitting threes, which when they played us at home, Texas A&M was like ice cold from 3. They didn't make a 3 the entire first half. And so for them to go to this game where the whole game they shot over 50%, 2 games in a row, some teams just get hot. Tennessee beat Kentucky. Great. We wanted that because we wanted Kentucky to not get that number 1 seed. It sucks. You wish both could lose, but whatever. And then you get to the championship, Tennessee versus Texas A&M. We're thinking, okay, maybe Texas A&M could do this Cinderella thing and keep Tennessee from finally winning a ring. Tennessee's been kind of our other like new blood rival for a little bit here. And they finally pulled it off. They finally got a ring. They won 65-50. I need ESPN to know that Tennessee won the SEC tournament championship and
Right.
stop calling them SEC champions. Like, we are the SEC. It's so annoying that 2 times now in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever, Tennessee is getting this like love as champions when really we're the real champions. We won the regular season a couple years ago and they tied us up at the end, or even though we beat them at home, and now they're winning a tournament during our regular season and people are calling them champions. Tournament champions, cool. We all know the regular season champions like a little more legit. I'm glad they didn't get it ultimately. I'm glad no one else got number 1 seed.
Yeah, me too. Look, Tennessee hadn't won the tournament since '79. Auburn hadn't won it since '85 when they won a few years ago. It was a long time, but we've ribbed Tennessee for a while, as they get a lot of hype and they really don't win anything. And they've only made 1 Elite 8 ever, which is what Auburn had done before Bruce arrived. So
and that Elite 8 was from Bruce.
But let's be clear. I don't know how you feel about it. I've watched a lot of basketball the last few weeks. Tennessee is playing really, really well. And I think they have a harder road. And that gives me some hope that maybe they're not going to break down that Final Four wall. But, man, a lot of people are going to be picking them because they have this – they're defending – they've always defended really well. That Rick Barnes is a great defensive coach, but offensively, it always felt like Auburn and these other teams just had more explosive offense. They're still not the most explosive offense, but they are so in sync with each other. They have an identity. They're playing really hard and together and gritty, and they just seem like a really solid group of old and young and big guys and small guys, and they're physical. I talked about that. So that's a lot about Tennessee. But
it feels like they have their chemistry right. While
yes.
ours is sputtering a bit, it's kind of almost hard to watch Tennessee right now because theirs seems to be so on. Their passing game is really interesting.
Yes.
They move the ball around a lot and put in a lot of hands while we're doing kind of the opposite, and it's been frustrating to watch on our side. So
they have an offensive identity. They have an offensive system that they're so comfortable with after 32 games or whatever. And Bruce is never going to look like that, so I don't think we should compare to that necessarily. But they look like very dangerous. If you're looking for a positive at how do we keep Tennessee from matching our Final Four or whatever, it would be they have to go through Villanova and Arizona in the same bracket. I think they have a pretty easy path to the Sweet 16, but after that, it could get really tough.
Yeah, so that was kind of the narrative of the SEC tournament, is that Texas A&M had a bit of a Cinderella run. We all thought they did enough to make it to the tournament, and they didn't. The other narrative now that we've seen the seeding of NCAA, and this is why we wanted to do the show after that everything's done, because the narrative's changed since they went out and beat Arkansas too. All of a sudden, our loss to them is not quite as bad. And then the fact that after all this said and done, the seeding kind of still ended up being exactly where we thought it was going to be. If Tennessee had ended up being number 1 seed after this, we'd be a little more upset that we allowed this in our magic season. We allowed Tennessee to kind of steal the thunder at the end there.
Well, two things. One, Tennessee kind of got hosed because the committee has a history of these Sunday results. They don't take them into account because they have to build this thing out with all the locations and this, like, the Big Ten is always, it never matters. Iowa won and had a great win over Purdue today. They still were a 5 seed because that game ended 10 minutes before the selection show, and they don't have. So I think Tennessee had that happen a little bit. I think they probably should have been on the 2 line, but because they had already put it out, they end up as a 3. That's stupid. It's 2022. The NCAA should figure that out. The other thing I would say, A&M doing this in the SEC tournament made they are now a quad 1 loss for us. All of our losses this year were to quad 1, opponents. So I think that helped our cause when it came down to the bracket as well.
Yeah, I'm glad the committee seems to take a longer view on some of this stuff.
Yep.
I'm glad they seem to do that because ESPN seems to be going the opposite, Yeah. So this can kind of get us into the game here a little bit. So we lost in the first round. I'm glad we have a couple days to take a breath. Matt gets my most angry text. Like, it's interesting. We get into it sometimes when we have bad losses like this, that I'm like, the sky is falling. Everything's going so badly. We're completely broken. And Matt's like getting angry at me. Like, what? So you just giving up on the team? You're going to go volunteer again? Because one time I threatened to go volunteer instead of watch Auburn sports anymore because they just disappoint me and I could do better things in my time. And,
that was a different sport. That was a different sport, by the way.
Yeah. Basketball's never done that to me. I still believe in basketball. It's not completely broken me. But, man, this was a tough one. I'm glad we had a little more perspective on it. My narrative's still a little bit on this game and like this kind of end of season sputtering that's been happening. I think we've sealed the deal that it's not just, we had to play at Arkansas and at Tennessee, and then you throw in this at Florida where we lost by 1, and it's kind of, but then you add, you just have those 3 and you do whatever against Mississippi State, then like, you're like, okay, well, we played a lot of tough away games. It's really tough to win away. It's kind of crazy. But then you throw in the overtime at Mississippi State. Then you throw in this Texas A&M game. And I think you have to admit that we're not trending in the right direction at all. And it's not just because we played tough people. In my kind of like metaphor, I think that's just like workable or whatever. So we've been kind of like a NASCAR driving around the track, leading the pack. We need to change the tires. We need to change the oil. We need to adjust a couple things, but we're leading. And there's only a couple laps left. I think we can push it. Just keep the engine going. It's going to red line. We know it's going to overheat, but we just don't want to change anything about this car when we're already winning and we're so close to like doing something we've never done or haven't done hardly ever in our history, like winning an SEC regular season. You don't want to screw something up right at the end. And it feels like the engine is finally blown. We blew a gasket or whatever. And maybe in this week or whatever, it's not something too serious and we can get in there and change this or that or whatever, cool the engine off and it's fine. Or maybe the engine is just freaking blown up and we just have lost. It just feels like we've lost the confidence. We've lost it doesn't feel right. Something has to change. And it feels like we waited too late to change it.
Well, I think you're also, I don't know what specifically people want to do that doesn't involve scrapping our existing rotation and completely changing our offensive approach after 32 games. Like, I think people kind of underestimate or overestimate what the options are at this point. You can work on shot selection. You can work on the distribution of shots. You can work on, what play calls we're going to do and what looks we're going to try. And ultimately, I don't know what your thoughts on this game were. To me, we missed a lot of open shots, and A&M made a bet. A&M made a bet in this game that was very smart. And going into it, they just said, hey, if Auburn hits a bunch of threes to beat us, that's fine. We're going to defend the lane at all costs. We're going to help down low against their bigs. We're going to out-physical. I think the book is out that you can try to rough us up inside, and we don't handle it very well.
It was like every time someone drove the ball, the guy that should have been on the 3 was crashing in every single time and daring us to kick it. And we kicked it and we kicked it and we kicked it. And I don't blame them at all for trying to hit those threes for like the first 3/4 of the game. I was like, you have to, if they're going to keep giving you open threes, you got to keep shooting and they will eventually go down. We've seen it a million times where eventually they go down. Well, they eventually went down like right at the end, but we've been doing that a lot lately where we like try to do these furious comebacks and it's not,
But
something's off.
You're right. You're right, though. Like the adjustment there, I think we started 0 for 14 from 3 or something ridiculous. We missed every open shot. It was kind of like, it just felt like the biggest disaster game we've had. We may have felt like we had the disaster game, but this was the ultimate, like, nothing's going right. A&M super, again, at that point, they're like, this is our opportunity to go to the tournament. We got to beat this Auburn team. We just played yesterday. We're used to the court. We're used to the rims. Let's go take them out. And they did. Honestly, it's a real testament to this group at Auburn that they even had a shot, and we'll talk about why, but not only just that the score was close. They held A&M in the 60s. They won turnovers. They won rebounds. They won bench points. They won blocks. They won steals. They tied assists, as bad as that offensive game was. They did not play a bad game in any other capacity other than shooting. They just could not make shots. And sometimes we get too in depth with basketball. It's about making open shots when you get them and creating open shots. And Auburn's offense wasn't great, but they had plenty of good looks at the rim. They had good looks inside. They had good looks outside. The crazy thing is, I'm done. I know I'm ranting. The last, everybody at halftime was like, we got to drive the ball. We got to drive the ball. We got to drive the ball. Well, statistically, we were getting more points per play from 3 than from 2 at that point. Even as horrid as that first half was, we weren't getting anything. My point is, we weren't making anything inside over their length and their double.
30 on the whole game, 30% from the field, 25% from 3. And that was after this.
And that's with Wendell
comeback at the end.
Right.
Where we hit a bunch of stupid threes that were crazy. But man, there's some metrics out there people were sharing on Twitter. People knew this was a crazy, weird game, which is how bad we were shooting and how rare that is. And there were some metrics about that do kind of shot selection versus anyways, they're saying with that shot selection, with the shots we took and the stats we had in the rest of the game, 75% of the time, the team that has Auburn stats would have won. It just happened to be that 25% of the time where just everything went wrong or whatever. And there's also stats going around showing the shot table of where all the shots were and just showing how insane how many threes we shot and how many they missed. I mean, we shot 36 threes to their 16. We shot 20 more threes than them. I mean, that's part of the game. They were daring us to do that
and made the same amount. They hit 8 of 16. We were 9 of 36. Looking back, it obviously feels really stupid that we took 36 threes and only 33 twos. We took more threes than twos on a day where we couldn't hit anything. But again, part of that, I think your criticism is fair. Part of it is we were getting those open looks early, and that is so much part of our DNA when you kick to the open shooter and you shoot it, right? We've been wanting our shooters to shoot in rhythm. Well, they did that, but didn't feel like they were a little hesitant, and then we were just slow to adjust. We were slow to adjust that the threes aren't going down. We need to force some action and do some other things.
You talk about the hesitancy, and that's part of the reason why it's easy as fans and easy as we've all been there as leaders in some sort of club or whatever, or most of us probably have. And people can tell you things aren't going right or things are going wrong or they're upset or whatever, but no one ever brings to you how to fix it or anything like that. They just want to let you know that they're upset about this or whatever. So it's easy for us to be upset and say this car is broken and we don't know what's going on. But yeah, we don't know exactly how to fix it, because if we do start messing with all the lineups and putting people in here and there and playing less minutes here and there, stuff you can already see that Wendell and KD, and there's some weird stuff going on with their confidence right now. And you texted me or talked to me or at one point that Jabari had a moment where it felt like he looked around and was like, what is going on? How can I not get some help out here? What do I need to do? I've done all the alpha moves. I've done all the things and it's still not working. I'm sure Kessler's having his moments too with his sore shoulder now. They clearly tried to work it to Kessler early in the second half, which I loved, but he got into a little foul trouble at time, or only 2, but it felt like he was in a little bit of some issues and it just didn't work. I don't know. You can mess with something's got to go with the guards. We should have been doing it weeks ago, but because we were winning, we didn't. There is something going on with the threes. They are trying some new stuff. They're playing Chris Moore a little more. Clearly, there's if we're diagnosing the issues with this team, Walker and Jabari are still playing great. There's we can get into the ISO Jabari alpha guy stuff in a little bit, but the biggest issues are the 3 and the guards. And we know the biggest thing are the threes. They cannot seem to hit an open 3. I mean, I'm yelling at my screen when Cambridge shoots a 3 at all, which is so bad. But it's gotten to that point where even an open 3 is not a good shot for Cambridge. He's shooting like 16% or something like that in conference from three. And it looks so bad right now too. Like, so he, even an open three is not good for him. So sure, they're going to definitely dare you to do that and definitely bring in who's supposed to be guarding that three into the lane because they can't do anything. Then you got Flanagan, who we've talked about a million times. Also not a great three shooter. He's hit a one or two now recently, but still just not confident in that three. Takes a charge. Like we have our little check marks. I have my text groups with some of my friends. Check mark, Alan Flanagan took a charge. Check mark, Alan Flanagan airballed a three. And so it's going badly there. So we're playing Chris Moore a little more. He doesn't have any offense. So we know the three position is killing us right now because not only are they not doing well, they're also like allowing the other team to crash in on the that. But that's not the only issue. If that was the only issue, we could kind of work around it. But then you're like